All right, good afternoon, everybody. It's 28 December 2025, about 12:41 p.m. here on the East Coast. And there's Jack Dawson, usually the first one in the ballpark. Welcome in, Brother Jack. Hope you're doing well today. So we're going to do this again Sundays when they come up, comments about comments. And there's one comment that we're going to really kind of focus on today, and I think it's a good one. Hey, John, welcome in, and we will get to it. So I had a lot of fun last night with Tribe Fan on here doing some Stratomatic baseball. We did some full count baseball earlier. Greg Gorecki, welcome in. Hopefully the storm didn't do you too much dirt last night. Um, I hope all is well there for you. Um, so yeah, this is again, as I said last Sunday, this is really just another way. I think a lot of times for content creators, we see comments and we uh, try to react to them, but sometimes it just gets lost in text. Or sometimes, like with one comment that we see today, I think it requires a little bit more maybe discussion. And I mean, it's a good thing. It's all good. It's no bad comment or anything like that. With that being said, the first one was just one that I again addressed to Kevin. So about pocket pennant run baseball. So Paul Fay is off doing some investigating and everything on this question. So he wanted to know whether it was possible to just activate a player on a roster, or add him to the roster or whatever. And so I thought, well, I was going to take the experiment. And this is in pocket pennant run baseball to the extreme and see if I could do in that game or in that software what I could do in Action PC baseball and out of the park baseball, Dombrov baseball, Pure Sim, pretty much anything that's out there. Greg says that more's coming this afternoon when all is said and done. You guys should have a foot and a half of snow in 2 days. Wow. And you had no snow prior to Christmas. Well, I'm still in the Christmas season, but that's a lot of snow. Ugh. Not a fan of snow. Not a fan of winter. Never have been. The only thing I liked it when I was a kid is if we got a snow day from school, but you know, um, I have never liked winter ever my entire life. I can't stand it. So stay safe, stay in if you don't have to go out, Greg. All right. So back to this pocket pennant run thing. So it's a great piece of software. It's a game. It's a board game assistant. It's a kind of miniature baseball reference, if you will. It's a great companion for keeping your own stats. It has a pretty nice baseball engine of it under it that's just going to keep getting better. Paul last night announced a really, really exciting new feature that will be coming sometime in 26, bulk import of teams. So this is in no way a knock on pocket pennant run baseball. Again, remember, this thing has evolved um, so quickly since it was first around, is just kind of a means to basically kind of print out cards. Um, if you go back to like the old Pocket Pennant Run version 2, and all you would see would be ratings, you couldn't play a game on there or anything like that. So it was strictly just an adjunct piece of software at that time to play the cards and dice version of Pocket Pennant Run baseball. Greg continues, Toronto hasn't been hit like this in many years. It used to be part of the snow belt. Could be worse. Montreal always gets hammered. I know from just being passing through both cities. Montreal always seems colder though too. Ugh. So I mean sometimes the temperature differential between Toronto and Montreal is fairly significant. But man, what a great country you live in, man, Canada. Yeah, I've had two chances. I'll get into that in another time. Had two chances to move to Toronto, Canada, or the outskirts, what have you, suburbs, and both times I didn't go. If I ever get a third chance, I am on my way north of the border. I really am. Um, so anyhow, so Pocket Pennant Run has evolved and evolved and evolved, and we've seen a ton of great ideas. Um, Again, working with these massive databases, being able to play pocket pennant run baseball without picking up a pair of dice if you don't have them, and it's reactive to touch sensitive screens. It's a board game companion. You can customize your own dice. Yeah, it still has some crashing issues. Um, People are reporting it, and I'm getting them too. But again, I see crashes still in action PC baseball. So I don't think, I think too, I think is for anybody who's adopted Pocket Pennant Run software, when you get a bug, report it. That's the best thing, but don't discount it as a bad game. There's been a lot of games, most people aren't. A lot of people are really enjoying Pocket Pennant Run baseball. But you really, comparing it to something like out of the park baseball, just in terms of stability, and that's kind of apples and oranges. Since out of the park baseball has been around since 1999, and this little dude's only been around for what, like 2 years or something like that. Greg says, so the other thing I like to do is keep multiple conversations going. Greg says we moved to a small town in 1974 for 2 years, and we had a ton of snow, and we get bitterly cold at times. I believe it. But still, there's much, even though you can have some brutal winters there. I kick myself all the time for never moving to Canada. I wish I had done so. Great stuff. Montreal's further north and away from the lakes, says John. Yeah, I mean, I remember just passing through Montreal on a flight back to Europe, and I had quite a bit of layover. And so where I was, I lived in Europe. Um, our winters were much like just Seattle. So if we got snow, it was gone in a day or two, and by February, you could be sitting out in your back garden, and in the Netherlands, for instance, and the crocuses were coming up. So here I get excited, finally when I start seeing them in like, late March or maybe April if we're lucky. Um, but yeah, just there's other things too. I won't get into the politics. Well, I will say this, whatever. Or Canada definitely more suits my kind of political leanings, put it that way. And I know that nothing's perfect. There's no perfect country, but there you go. Anyhow, so back to the Pocket Pennant Run thing. So Kevin wanted to know if we could do this. So I thought, well, I'll try this. So last night before I came on the air, I tried adding Lou Gehrig to the 1971 Pirates. It was just a team I already had up there, and I thought, well, let's add Lou Gehrig because I would be able to do that in other, baseball sims that have large databases, even going back to Pure Sim, which we have available for free on the Discord. So as it turns out, you can and can't do what Kevin wanted to do. So I showed this last night on the broadcast. You can catch it very, very early on. You can see basically the steps you have to go through. But I'll just touch on it again briefly. You have to basically, when you have that team loaded, you click add a player. And so what puzzles me right now is that, an upgrade from Bob Robertson, to be sure. Yeah, to be sure, Greg. Bob was, of course, a very important part of that 1970s Pirates Lumber Company, but Gehrig, wow. That's all right, tough day at the keyboard. That's the story of my life, Greg. So basically, you put in the players' names, and then you can hit a thing that says convert stats. It asks what year you're converting stats. You bring the stats in. So I put in 1936. That was a great year for Lou Gehrig. By that time, really out from under the shadow of Babe Ruth. And a hell of a year. That was also a great Yankees team, I think, because you had DiMaggio's rookie year, and you had Gehrig just tearing it up. So I'm bringing it in. So you got to go to Baseball Reference, because you can't, for some reason, go to the databases. This massive, when you put all those 8 databases together in Pocket Pennant Run Baseball, it's insane. And there's David Baseball Demo saying Bob Robertson was solid. Indeed, he was. And welcome in, AP. Saw AP last night in Dave Gardner's Maca Madness broadcast. That was a lot of fun. San Francisco and Montreal, a bit of Apple baseball. And there's Barbara, our official whirlwind. Hope you're doing well today, Barbara. So I'm doing all that, and it asks, it wants batting average, isolated power, stolen bases, and fielding percentage. And basically, those four are the things that determine the ratings in the pocket pennant run, pocket pennant run game, the software, and even the cards and dice game. So I thought, okay. And then when I hit that, it said, well, there's no historical data on your player, but he's been added to your team. And so when you go there, Lou Gehrig is rated an A batter, A for power, C for fielding, and A for defense. Pretty accurate for that year. So AACA, that's obviously a top tier player. But when you actually look at the team stats, then after you've added him in, there's no Lou Gehrig because it's not drawing on any stats. Hey, Dwayne, welcome in. So it's not drawing on the stats itself. And so I thought, well, okay, I'll jump in a game and see what happens. And put Lou Gehrig batting cleanup. So I moved Sargent up to third and put Gehrig in cleanup because Gehrig batted cleanup for the Yankees. And when it comes there, all right, so in pocket pennant run baseball, you do see the historical stats for the players, but for Gehrig, all there was there was no picture, and there was no historical stats. And I mean, come on, with all the games that we play, and whether you're playing cards and dice baseball, or you're playing digital baseball, or you play both, you do want that statistical grounding to look at, right? It's not just about ratings. You look at an Apple card, you know, and you've got everything up there for that player for that season. And you know, so I mean, I took an obvious like Lou Gehrig, so I know Gehrig was a slugger. Gehrig was aggressive on the base path, so I know about Lou Gehrig. But what if I brought in not like the guy last night, Maka? I don't know anything about Maka, and I'm just going to see these ratings. I like to have context. So, and the context thing doesn't have to do with pocket pennant run. It says with a comment that we're going to get to later. So the upshot is I'm hoping that maybe this is something Craig Harris will consider doing because every other module in pocket pennant run baseball draws from again those massive those 8 databases that you can pull from any one of those when you're creating custom teams. It pulls from this huge database of as played lineups and actual historical games, about 200,000 of those. Aaron Reed joining us here. And AP, um, AP says he can't wait for payoff pitch for PC. I think everybody's really excited about that. So, also says he's going to have a busy day today, and Barbara wishing him, saying, hope everything goes well for him. And Aaron Reed giving us the double whammy hello. All right, guys. So, hopefully, that will be something that will be added in the future. Um, since you can do it everywhere else, I don't understand why you can't just add it. Um, you know, and not I will make the comparison, and this has nothing to do with stability of a game, but rather functionality of a game. And so I don't know whether right because the other way you could do it, but it would be very, very, very time consuming. Yeah, put a feather in that and call them macaroni. Exactly, David. Well done. Barbara is also excited for payoff pitch for PC. Awesome, Barbara. Barbie, you're really cool. I don't know if you're mic shy. It'd be really nice to have you on. Some we have when Bernie and I do our Diamonds and Dice podcast, we love to talk to gamers. It's more gamer focused, developer focused. So um, maybe we can cajole you some night to just come on chat with us. It's very, very informal. Just talk about all the games you play. It doesn't necessarily have to be all about baseball. Um, because I see you around the community and you seem very knowledgeable and really love the games you play. I know you're a big New York sports fan, so think about it. Don't give me an answer right now, Barbara. Please don't give me an answer right now. But again, it's just like it's an hour thing. Bernie makes me stay to an hour if it's on his channel. If it's on my channel, then it's a little different, or on this area, whatever. So, Craig, hopefully that is something that you will add because I think that really, really um, would open up the game. Because the only other way to do it would be to create the Pittsburgh Pirates, say, of 1971, bring in all those players plus Lou Gehrig, because then the game doesn't know. and then you're going to get all of Gehrig's stats and all that stuff. But to do something like that, if or if you're looking at lineups and you're not agreeing with what the game has put in there for that 25-man roster, maybe you want to switch it up. Uh, that's the only way you can kind of do things right now. And to me, that's kind of just reinventing the wheel. There's MV and Dugout Talks. Hi, welcome to the family there, Dugout Talks. How you doing? Your why does your okay, because of YouTube and it does just the at thing, your but your avatar looks pretty familiar with me to me. So anyhow, um, Diamond Legends Baseball started yesterday. They had their opening day, so best of luck to everybody in that league. And Dugout Talks is doing great. It's great to hear. So that's what I just wanted to answer about Pocket Pennant Run Baseball. Still love the game. Still really cool. Um, we saw how well um, uh, Full Count Baseball played last night. It did kind of freeze up in the sixth or seventh inning, but you got to remember it's not a Windows native application yet. It's still running within a sort of DOS shell and everything like that. But it played really, really nicely. I don't think it's very well optimized yet. And we were, running it along a bunch of other stuff. We were trying to show that player thing last night in Pocket Pennant Run, but Full Count Baseball played a nice game of baseball. The AI manager was going to the pen when needed and stuff like that. It's good stuff. And then Tim and I did a Strat Max game last night too. So really, really, really cool. Just realized that Forbes Field had huge foul territory. Yeah, this was a huge, huge ballpark. Um, no hitter. There was never no hitter pitched in Forbes. This was a big park, and a lot of people think about dead ball parks as being these tiny little bandboxes, and that's actually not true. So parks like Baker Bowl were the exception to the rule, and even Ebbets Field. So Ebbets Field fit exactly in one city block, which eventually, right? If you look at pictures of Ebbets Field through the years, they had to sort of build vertically because there's no way they could build laterally, and that ultimately led to um, the sad decision. I think that the Dodgers left Brooklyn and went to L.A. But none of us around here were. Um, well, maybe there might be a few of us, not me, but some of you here might have been little kids in the 1950s, and maybe have been aware enough that the Dodgers had moved west in 1957 along with the Giants. So I don't know. Um, this was a big ballpark, a big ballpark, and a lot of them were. You look at like Huntington Avenue grounds in Boston. That was huge. So one of the two sites of the first World Series, and in fact, the other park, Exposition Park in Pittsburgh, was huge. So, but these dead ball parks had to be built within cities, and there was no parking per se. And actually, out there beyond the center field fence is the University of Pittsburgh, and this wall is still along there, and home plate is cased in like a protective glass. I believe it's in the Student Union building at Pitt. I'm a Penn Stater, so but I do know that Forbes Field is still partially there, and this famous left field wall where Mazeroski hit that home run out. And so this gets to my first comment. So the comment here was actually about Forbes Field, or one of the first one. And this is from Thomas Morgan Jr. He says, "Love your home screen." He says, "My first game ever was in that ballpark," meaning Forbes Field, in 1964. And he says, "Great channel." He says, "Goes without saying, Merry Christmas." Merry Christmas to you also, Thomas. Um, I never got a chance to see a game in Forbes Field. I wish I would have. Saw some games in Three Rivers, obviously, in PNC Park, but it would have been amazing to be at the park where Hannes Wagner played, and Arky Vaughan and Fred Clark, and Ralph Kiner, and Roberto Clemente, of course, played there too. Willie Stargell. But I got those. But again, you see films of them at Three River Stadium, but to have been there, um, and right there where the greatest shortstop to ever play the game patrolled this area right here. And his great pupil, Archie Vaughn, one of maybe at least the top 10 shortstops in baseball, right there. Kiner out there in left field. Greenberg at the end of his career had some time with the Buccos. Smokey Burgess back here. Um, and just all the great outfields. Max Carey in center, one of the greatest center fielders of all time. Fred Clark, brilliant, brilliant. So just Paul Wainer, Lloyd Wainer. I mean, to be able, I've always said that if God allowed you to do what you wanted to do in heaven, I would say, well, until I guess you're going to end things up and all that, could I have a time machine and could I have a thing that will allow me to do two things? I want to explore the universe without worrying about pesky relativity issues, and I want a time machine to go back and see games in all these old ballparks, Forbes, Ebbets, um, South End grounds, Huntington Avenue grounds, the Palace of the Fans in Cincinnati, the Polo grounds. I'm sure many of you saw games at the house that Ruth built. I don't consider Yankee Stadium the new one now. That's not the house that Ruth built. That's the house that some other dude built to make more money. That's okay. Yeah, Dugout Talks. You're very, very welcome. This PPR guide video is very helpful. You're very welcome. Paul Fay's channel is really the best source for Pocket Pennant Run, but I'm glad that I was able to help. Really, really glad. So AP said he grew up in Brooklyn and would always hear stories about the Brooklyn Dodgers. AP also asking, did Paul mention if he's working on Pocket Pennant Run to make sure that the replay stats are more accurate after completing a season replay? Paul is always working on things in PPR. So, and Paul, so with Paul, the thing is he will run the software through its paces like hundreds and hundreds of times of games. So, he's like the only play tester there and doing a fantastic job. And it's thanks to Paul that we do have so many great things now that we can do a Pocket Pennant Run, building upon the great software that Craig Harris created and the great game that Craig Harris and Matt McKeever. Let's not forget Matt. He doesn't really have a lot to do with the Pocket Pennant Run software. But I just remember, what was it, earlier in the year that we had the addition of player photos and the logos. And the game is it's shaping up nicely. It's again, it's in a crowded market with games like Out of the Park Baseball and Action PC, the upcoming Payoff Pitch, of course, and so many others, Digital Diamond Baseball, what have you. But it's a hybrid, so really, Out of the Park isn't one of its competitors. But Action PC now, with the addition of manual entry, now that becomes a competitor. Digital Diamond Baseball, even as terrible as the interface is, Strat PC, of course, PC Replay. So crowded field for Pocket Pennant Run, but the freedom to create in Pocket Pennant Run is amazing. Stick Tap Sports Network, welcome in, man. Guys, check out that channel. Dugout Talks looks like the way you got the thing here. We got Bart Lowe. Bart, where have you been? Bart hasn't been here in ages. Welcome back, buddy. Stick Tap says he has a coworker or had a coworker from New Jersey. His favorite teams, New York, were the Jets, Rangers, and Mets. I often thought he'd make a good psychological study. Greg Orecki said he was 5 and chose the Cardinals because he liked the uniforms, and the Pirates because he loved Roberto Clemente and Willie Stargell. Well, you can't go wrong with either franchise. So yeah, you were very young in the 50s. So you were, by the time you were 1959, well, we know what happened with the Dodgers after all those years, right? All those years in Brooklyn. They had one world championship in 1955. They moved to LA in 57. And just 2 seasons later, the Los Angeles Dodgers get their first world championship. So you wouldn't even have seen anything there. So Wrigleyville, I was going to, my ex-wife and I, back in the day, we were going to move to that section of Chicago. And I know brutal winters, but man, we were looking at a brownstone. It was very nicely priced. and it was, I think, 4 blocks from Wrigley Field. Oh my God. Anyhow, he says, moved to Wrigleyville a few years ago from California. Walking around Wrigley Field rekindled your love of baseball history and got you back into baseball sims. What a great park. Um, Last time I was at Wrigley Field was in 2003, so that was before all the renovations. But um, yeah, you just walk into Wrigley Field, and yeah, that's going to rekindle. And I mean, look, as beautiful as PNC Park is, and a lot of these other new kind of retro parks, there's nothing like walking into those. When you think that Fenway's the oldest, Wrigley is second, the third oldest park in the major leagues is Dodger Stadium. So that's a weird thing to think about. The Dodger Stadium is the third oldest ballpark. Um, and so for Dodger stadiums, right, getting out of the awful Coliseum, which football fields are smaller than baseball fields. So, um, and you look at it, and it's in its day, it was right futuristic when Dodger Stadium opened, but it's kind of like now it's retro with not because it's truly retro. But I can certainly, I felt that, when they had the pennants up, and of course, you had the obvious Hall of Famers, like those banners, the things that they do in ballparks, So of course you saw Ernie Banks, Billy Williams, Hack Wilson, um, you know, all these great Cubby players. But you also got to see the ones that are going to be known to Cubs fans, but not necessarily known outside of the north side of Chicago. So Riggs Stevenson and Stan Hack and Charlie Grimm and so on and so forth. That it was just amazing to sit there, and the Cubs fans were really cool. I didn't sit in the bleachers; I sat in the grandstands, but very knowledgeable baseball fans. Contrary to what a lot of people told me about Cubs fans, they're actually really cool, really friendly, and good crowd. And they were cool with me being a Pirates fan. It was a Pirates and Cubs game, um, and that was such a great time. I love Wrigley Field. And I love the fact that they still use the pennants for the standings and stuff like that. John says pocket pennant runs looks interesting, but I just can't see how it would fit into all your other games. Already have more games and seasons than time, as do I. But if I see something really cool, um, it's going to give me some good bang for the buck. I'm going to pick it up. Um, and some games I buy every year I don't play, but it's to support developers. Baseball Mogul really falls under that category. Um, but it's really getting long in the tooth. And in fact, if you look down here, it's uninstalled. I actually uninstalled it earlier this week because I'm like, I'm not playing this game. So, but I'll buy it next year. Greg says he's seen games at Busch Stadium, Three Rivers, and Fenway. Nice. Never been to Fenway. Been to Boston many times, but never been to Fenway. And yep, missed the Brooklyn Dodgers. Y'all too young. We're all too young here. Been watching videos usually the next day. Okay, Bart. Well, that explains why you haven't been around, buddy. I'm glad you're here. Greg says, being born in 1959, he says he takes the blame, sort of, for the Blue Jays losing the World Series. Uh, but in reality, it falls on Jeff Hoffman. All right, we'll keep that in mind, Greg. We don't want you to have to take on any extra guilt that need be. AP says the Dodgers should have moved to San Francisco and the Giants to Los Angeles for 2 reasons. He says San Francisco has the trolleys, and the Dodgers were named for trolley Dodgers. Nah, it makes perfect sense. And Los Angeles is a bigger city than San Francisco, and the nickname Giants fits. I like the logic. Um, I guess they probably should have thought about that. But there's an interesting story, of course, in all these years that Walter O'Malley was so much maligned for the move of the Dodgers to Los Angeles. But the villain in the story is Robert Moses, um, who was the commissioner of like city plan. He was like some city planner or something. And so, right, O'Malley goes to him and said, look, and they already had the real estate in Brooklyn where they were going to build a new ballpark. It was actually going to be this very sort of Buckminster Fuller. It even had like a geodesic dome. It was going to be a dome stadium. So predating the Astrodome, right? Um, And Robert Moses basically said, no, but you can build a ballpark in Queens. And O'Malley said, Queens ain't Brooklyn. And it went back and forth and back and forth. In the meantime, the mayor of LA is saying, hey, why don't you come out here and check out LA? And so really, it wasn't Walter O'Malley because, I mean, what were you going to do at Ebbets Field? Do a fifth deck? And there was just no room and there was no real estate. This thing was smack in. It was the only team in America that was not representing, it was representing a former city. Brooklyn was a borough, and it was a real point of pride for those fans. And I think what a slap in the face. Queens is not far from Brooklyn, but still, to put the ballpark in Queens, and so, but still, to to see the Abe Stark sign and to hear the Dodger Symphony Band and Hilda Chester and all the great characters there, um, in Ebbets Field would be amazing. Just like again going to Wrigley, which Wrigley, of course, can't be torn down. It's the National Historic Site. I think Fenway is the same. So, um, so Greg says he slept well. He said he was there in 1993, and Joe Carter um, had us relive the magic of Bill Mazeroski. How about it? Yep. So Greg says never went to Bridge or Tiger Stadium, but did attend and play a hockey game at the Olympia. Cool. Good, 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 good. Barbara says true New Yorkers don't quit, and the Dodgers were never a New York team to her. So that goes back to, so Barbara, you were, I mean, obviously you're not old enough, but if you would have gone back in the day, so yeah, Barbara would have been either a Giants or a Yankees fan. And a lot, especially the Giants. So the Dodgers and the Giants, they just took that rivalry to the West Coast. But I've read so many stories and interviews of people that said, the back there, living back in those days, and baseball fans were, maybe this person's father was a Dodgers fan, and she or he was a Giants fan, and Johnny Mize took a lot of crap, as did Leo DeRocher. That was a serious rivalry, and so for a lot of New Yorkers, yeah, that was a borough. But for Brooklyn, it was a point of pride, and um, so I mean, it's fascinating. The story of New York baseball is really really interesting. I mean, and I think one of the things that Ken Burns' baseball documentary gets right is New York was the capital of baseball for a while. It really really was. Um, and regardless, I mean, I think Brooklyn leaving and the New York Giants leaving, and that left the Yankees kind of just in charge until of course, the founding of the Mets in 1962. And the Mets have built an excellent franchise. There's no doubt about that. Um, but a lot of people. So I've told you guys, I got to know Joe Paterno, not intimately, but I would talk to him a few times a week on my way to work when I was working at Penn State. And Joe Paterno's favorite sport was baseball. And he was a Brooklyn Dodger fan, big time Brooklyn Dodger fan. And you think of all the great accomplishments that Joe Paterno had in college football and all the great things he did for Penn State, including he and his wife, Sue Paterno, putting up the so much funding for the new Paterno Library and helping with the renovation of Petit Library and all the things Paterno's did. And he told me that the proudest ever in sports, he was at Ebbets Field on the 15th of April, 1947, when Jackie Robinson took the field. So that was just amazing. I mean, so here I am, I'm a Penn State employee. I was a recent graduate there, but worked for Penn State and got to talk to this man who's a legend, a football coach legend. And we would talk baseball. It was amazing. It was so amazing. Um, so Barbara says, yes, my father had a big rivalry over the Dodgers. Okay. Greg says, love Willie Mays, Willie McCovey, and Juan Marichal, and think Bobby Bonds belongs in the Hall of Fame. I agree with you. He definitely does. John says, even though he's a big Braves fan, he actually likes the Mets, and their announcers, your best friends growing up, were Mets fans. Nice. That's the really cool thing about baseball. We can have that rivalry. And I mean, I think even at the end of the day, as long as you didn't talk um, Just trying to get one of my cats to behave here. Darcy, stop. Um, you know, Dodgers and, well, at least in New York, Giants and Dodgers fans, I think, could somewhat coexist. But I kind of think of it as like kind of the five families, Cosa Nostra, the two families there. Um, but it's interesting, Barbara, to look at your like what you say there, because this is what makes New York baseball fascinating, right? Because the Yankees are also in a borough; they're in the Bronx, but yet, so a New Yorker is going to look at a Yankees team, or not all New Yorkers, but it's just with you, Barbara. So you would, and I find this fun. I'm not picking on you at all. So one of the Yankees in the Bronx, the Dodgers were in Brooklyn. Both of them boroughs, right? And but only one of them is a New York team to you, and you would say the Yankees are a team. So that's kind of interesting. And of course, the Mets are in Queens. So, and Barbara is from Brooklyn. Okay, that's cool. John says he grew up in South Florida with lots of New Yorkers. Yeah, lots of New Yorkers down there. Lots of snowbirds, huh? I think more New Yorkers go there than any other state. I don't hear a lot of Pennsylvania people go there. A lot of people that I know in Pennsylvania end up in California for whatever reason, which is not a bad thing. So Barbara is from Brooklyn. She is from, there you go. So would have been amazing to go to Ebbets Field and the original Yankee Stadium and the Polo Grounds. And of course, in the 50s, you had Duke Snyder, Willie Mays, and Mickey Mantle all playing at the same time. You can't beat it. Bart is from the Bronx. Okay. So it's New York Day here. I don't see any, in our community, at least used to be dominated by Boston Red Sox fans, but seeing that we're getting a lot more diversity in the community now. I think we have like even 6 Pirate fans now. So that's kind of nice to see. All right. Let me see. D13 dash L3Y, I guess. How you join the Discord? Basically, just go on Discord, look for Beatles Eternally, friend me, say, hey, this is me, and we'll invite you to the Discord that way. Let me see. Stick Tap, thank you for your well wishes about my mom. He's put an hour ago. He said, missed this last night. Keep your mom in my thoughts. Be well, my friend. Doing my best, buddy. Jack telling us here in the comments, back in the comments section, says, good evening, brother Beatles. Earlier today, I finished game 1 of your 2022 Twins season. Honestly, it's late, but only managed for run a home run from 3 players. That's it, and a few backup pitchers after your starter. Final score, Mariners 9 and the Twins 4. So the Twins right now, looks like they're 0-1. It's all right. Long season, buddy. All right, now I'm going to get to the main part. This is the comment that I think is going to be, that would be fun to have a good old chinwag about sometime. So for context, and right now I'm not looking at the chat, I'm looking at this comment. But I want to give you guys, actually, I'll look at the chat while I give you the context and go back. So RJL Network and we have yet to have our debate about the greatest left-handed pitcher in baseball. Yes, actually they were. I remember seeing a photo taken from an airplane and Polo Grounds and Yankee Stadium so close to one another. That is so cool. So for Robert, Sandy Koufax is the greatest left-handed pitcher of all time. And look, he is I will definitely concede Sandy Koufax, one of the greatest left-handers of all time, one of the greatest pitchers of all time. So even, the man was called the left arm of God. However, I counter and offered, and we still have to have our debate, and we're going to try to find somebody to actually moderate it. When you look at stats and overall career dominance, my vote goes to Lefty Grove, actually. And when you see his numbers, you'll see why. And Steve Tate had pointed out something really interesting, that if you normalize Lefty Grove back to the right, what Lefty Grove was doing, he was doing dead ball numbers in a hitter's era. And just I'll show you his baseball reference page, and we'll look at Sandy Koufax's. If you look at sheer numbers and the career, now had they gotten Koufax's arm straightened out early in his career, and again, I'm not saying Koufax isn't a great lefty, he is, but Lefty Grove, just ridiculous dominance, and not only with just good teams, but not so good teams. Carl Hubble, also excellent candidate as well, great screwballer from the New York Giants in the Hall of Fame. Welcome back, Barbara. So let's get to this comment, and this is from Chris Lavarone, so Paisan. He says, Chris says, love listening to Beatles, and his chin wags while he's drinking his morning coffee and rolling some games. So thank you for that, Chris. He says, my take on the Grove versus Koufax discussion, Andy says it's always the same when discussing players before 1947 against more modern players. And I would say, I would agree with that because, you know, when Fleet Walker and his brother Welday were kind of, they were out of baseball, the abominable gentleman's agreement that kept players of color out until 1947. It is hard to talk about who is the greatest. It really is, because you would have to really, but how do we meaningfully bring in, if we're just talking pitchers, how do we bring in Bullet Joe Rogan? How do we bring in Satchel Paige? Satch did make it to the majors, and at a kind of a ripe age, was still mowing them down. But all we have are not only the what surviving reports that there are from black newspapers in the day, but also one of the coolest things ever. I've mentioned this quite a number of times, actually, that we know that in the off season back in those days, the players would barnstorm or whatever, and then of course you got to the minor leagues and all that happening. So, and a lot of Negro League players would be playing against players in the Pacific Coast League, and the scout for the New York Yankees was at a game in which Joe DiMaggio, still playing in the Pacific Coast League, they were playing against. They were playing against a Negro League team. I believe it was the Monarchs. And Satch was on the mound, and the scout wired New York. DiMaggio, ready for the majors, went 1 for 4 against Satchel Paige. So contemporaries knew how great these players were. But anyhow, he says Grove was great, obviously, by his numbers. And here's now where we could have a different debate, too. But he never had to pitch against some of the greatest athletes on the planet. He says, while it's not his fault, definitely raises a question. He says, and then he adds, at least in his opinion. And thank you for that. So this is where we start talking about context. So when we talk about, I'm going to comment this in a couple different ways, and please, folks, feel free to join in. That do we have a sort of bias to what we've seen opposed to what we haven't seen? Now, I'm not old enough to have seen Sandy Koufax pitch, and certainly there's nobody in this chat, there's nobody in this family that saw Lefty Grove pitch. Nobody here. I mean, unless you're, like 110 years old or something like that. You got to remember, Grove pitched in the 20s and 30s. And I'm going to touch on that too, especially the 1930s, which was a pretty explosive era for offense and his numbers. Managers become popular in the last 10 years. But we don't have any character managers. We were talking about that the other night, Dugout Talks. We don't have any Billy Martins anymore and Earl Weavers, and kind of crazy managers like that. They're kind of just managers now. You don't have the colorful figures like Tommy Lasorda and things like that. So when we talk about the greatest athletes in the planet, if we talk about in context, and you think about the hitters that Lefty Grove faced, some of these hitters that he faced are in the pantheon. We would consider them gods with a small g in the Baseball Hall of Fame. And were they not the best athletes on the planet at that time? Grove pitched against Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, Jimmy Fox. I could go on and on and on and on. Okay, we had 16 teams. Now, the other thing we think about great athletes, the great athletes that we see, and modern training methods, modern, you know, better understanding of biological kinesiology, better understanding of nutrition, proper training. I mean, some of the training regimens they did, if you look at like old films of the sliding pits they did and those big medicine balls and all the weird stuff kind of that they did that uh, and how pitchers were taught to throw and this and that and the other thing. I've always contended that somebody who has talent, whatever that is, whether it's talent in sports, whether you're an artist, a singer, a pianist, a violinist, a painter, a writer, greatness is greatness. Greatness is greatness. It doesn't matter the era. Just because music technology and other genres have come along. And I don't think Chris is going down this route, but this is an argument that I want to make. And when I say argument, I mean it in the academic sense, not calling names. But in academics, we refer to something as an argument. Thank you, Aristotle, for giving us that sort of thing. Anyhow, greatness is greatness. Is Mozart any less diminished because you know, Mozart was, all we have of Mozart, if you think about this, considered maybe the greatest composer who ever lived, or maybe, you got the big three, Mozart, Bach, Beethoven, right? There's nobody on the planet who ever heard them play. All we have are the interpretations of their works, and yet those works endure. Um, and so that doesn't diminish their greatness at all. Talent is talent. Babe Ruth. Greg Gorecki says the same argument could be made about the accomplishments of Babe Ruth, as unlike the hitter since the late 40s, he never played against any great black players. That is true. And all that being said, and all that equal, even though we can never make that the real meaningful comparison until 1947 onward, when again I'll refer back to the Ken Burns baseball documentary, that is when baseball truly became the national pastime. And absolutely right, because do we know? We'll never know. I mean, we have the major league equivalencies now for a lot of Negro League players, and of course we can. And again, YouTube. I know we're too small here right now, but that's a legit name. I'm not using a slur. They were called the Negro Leagues, and that's why I'm using that term. Anyhow, will we know? We're never going to know except through simulations how Satch or Bullet Joe Rogan would have done. How would Oscar Charleston have fared against Lefty Grove in regular season of 154 games? We'll never know. And so the only thing that we really do have to go by are numbers. And we are talking about the 60s, which will grow into a pitcher's era, and the 1930s, which is very much an offensive era. And so we kind of going to look at Lefty Grove, and I'd like to look at his 1930 year, but just to his career overall. Remember, 1930 was the year that Hack Wilson had 190 runs batted in, and probably never going to see that again. But even let's look at Babe Ruth. So even post 1947, all right. So Jimmy Fox, when he retired in the 40s, was second to Babe Ruth in lifetime home runs. So Babe Ruth's record stood from 1935 until 1974. So you had more years from 1947 to when Hank Aaron broke the record in 74 and fully integrated at that time, facing great pitching. But that record stood for a long, long, long time. And again, Babe Ruth was a great baseball player, would have made the Hall of Fame as a pitcher had Harry Frazee not sold him to Jacob Ruppert and the Yankees. He was one of the most dominant pitchers in the dead ball era, which was an era dominated by pitching. So there is that also to think about. Um, the greatness is greatness, and Sandy Koufax was great. And for those 5 or 6 seasons, he was untouchable. He was incredible. And so just to counter, it's not it's not Sandy Koufax's fault that his control was like shit. To not to put it too fine, but once they got that left arm of God under control, amazing. So again, had that been corrected earlier in Sandy Koufax's career, um, just incredible. But over an entire career, if we judge pitchers by their ability to um, keep runners off base, to keep games close, to win games, you look at a guy like Walter Johnson, who was pitching for one of the worst clubs ever. Walter Johnson doesn't even make it to doesn't get a chance to have, get a World Series ring, quote unquote, until 1924. But Walter Johnson consistently was sheer dominance with no run support, which is why I consider him the greatest pitcher in baseball history, in the baseball history that we have. I can't say, was he greater than Satchel Paige? I can't say that. I can only go by the history that we have. So let's bring up Lefty Grove in Baseball Reference, and this time using the Brave browser so that we can eschew. We don't have to deal with ads today because I'm just not in the mood to deal with ads. And let's look up Lefty Grove. All right, so career spanning 1925 to 1941. I'm going to leave this screen here for a moment. This is his main standard pitching. And so anybody that knows Baseball Reference, or if you've been, used to have the old, Macmillan Baseball Encyclopedia, or you had the, in my opinion, much better Total Baseball, all that black ink all over the place, just all over the place, just incredible. And of course, the italicized bold numbers are categories in which the player pitcher led not just his league but the major leagues. I think a big thing to look at here for Grove, we talk about 1930, which was an incredible offensive year. He led the major leagues in 209 with 209 strikeouts. He led the American League with an ERA plus of 217. Okay, so an average ERA plus is 100. So Grove in an explosive offensive year is 117 points above the average. A lifetime ERA plus of 148, nothing to sneeze at. He led he led the majors twice in ERA plus. So the other year that he led the majors was 1936. But he led an ERA plus in one way or another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times in ERA plus, which is a super, super, that's important. You look at ERA, 1930, he leads the major leagues with a 2.54 earned run average. And again, leads in ERA. And he only led the majors once in that, and that was 1930. But you look at look at the ERA. So his second year in baseball, 1926, a 2.51 earned run average. And he kind of like Paul Skeens, and he went 13-13. He wasn't getting the run support yet. Mac is still putting together that juggernaut that we would see in baseball history would witness in 1929, 30, and 31. The win-loss percentage obviously has a lot to do with run support. That WAR, look, 2 years in a row, 30 and 31, wins above replacement 10.4. He led the majors three, four times, five times in wins above replacement. I don't know if Derek Bain was on here, he'd be talking about win shares. And that's certainly another important thing to keep in mind. What else here? So the big shutout pitcher, of course, we think about Randy Johnson and Walter Johnson. Complete games. Led the majors twice in complete games, led in complete games in his career three times. I mean, there's just black ink all over the place. It's like a colony of ants on the screen here. Incredible, incredible, incredible. This guy is an MVP. Of course, he doesn't get the All-Star stuff until the All-Star game, and he was in the first All-Star game, so you don't see those there. But just nuts, just absolutely nuts. So if we'll compare him to Sandy Koufax here in a minute. We'll come back to this. And again, I'm not saying Sandy Koufax was not great. He certainly was great. And God grant him many years, he's still with us. So looking here, let's go through we'll come back to this too. This is crazy. So his black ink for pitching is 111. That's third all time. And the average Hall of Famer is 40. Gray ink for pitching, he is eighth at 319. Average Hall of Famer is 185. A likely Hall of Famer as averaging at 100. Lefty Grove is a 233. Hall of Fame standard 62, and the average Hall of Famer is at 50. Similar pitchers to Lefty Grove are Jim Palmer, John Clarkson, Eddie Plant, Carl Hubble. We've talked about him already a little bit. Bob Feller, Whitey Ford, Oldhouse Radbourn, Mickey Welch, Andy Pettitte, and Tom Glavine. And the only one not in the Hall of Fame in that list is Andy Pettitte. Now, does being in the Hall of Fame automatically make you a great player? No. We just read Bo James, works on the Hall of Fame. However, with all of that said, we look at all that black ink, but let's look at this. So again, we have he has 26th career in wins above replacement, if that is a stat that you follow. He is sixth all time in wins above replacement for pitchers. Earned run average, 3.06, but in a hitter's era, this ERA is under 3 from 1926. So 26, 29, 30, 31, 32, 35, 36, then again in 1939. Wins. And yeah, so Bart, I would definitely agree that he was probably one of the most dominant pitchers in baseball in a 5 or 6 year span. Yes, no argument. And again, what he did in that 5 and 6 year span was incredible. There's no denying that. I think he's one of the greatest left-handed pitchers of all time. I do not think he is the greatest pitcher of all time. And again, it is all subjective. Now, as far as facing that great talent, again, I mean, some of the hitters that that Lefty Grove was facing, one of those hitters happens to be considered the greatest baseball player of all time. Again, arguably, that's something we're never, ever, ever going to, we're probably never going to resolve who was the greatest. Again, not only just because of the Negro League issue, but even with that even if, let's say, we would run major league equivalencies, all those kinds of things. Right, Dwayne Martz and I, we go back and forth about Mickey Mantle and Willie Mays. And in my opinion, my looking at things, I consider Willie Mays the greatest center fielder of all time, and Mickey Mantle one of the greatest, but not the greatest. I think a title goes to Willie Mays. But again, we can compare numbers all day, and even ultimately, I think this Grove versus Koufax thing, by the numbers. I mean, numbers don't lie, but again, there are a lot of other things that we look at. We look at here adjusted ERA plus. Again, you look at this same period here, and he is first in the American League for 9 years, 10 years, 9 years. Just crazy stuff. and pitching against just some of the greatest hitters of the day, power hitters and great place hitters, and players that were great in the context of their era. And so again, I think that and something as good as Baseball Reference weighs all kinds of metrics and everything, and to be able to say that who would be most comparable, comparable to, and what have you, I think really also speaks volumes. I don't think there's anybody that's going to doubt the greatness of Carl Hubble. I know maybe not a lot of folks in the community know a lot about Carl Hubble. Certainly heard of Gettysburg Eddie Plank, though, Whitey Ford, and Whitey Ford, of course, yeah. Old Hoss Radbourn, 19th century, and Mickey Welch. These two guys, maybe, just in terms of similarities go, but we have to remember that Old Hoss and Mickey Welch pitched in right prior to 1893, when 1893 marks modern baseball. So that's the only thing. I don't know that I would have actually. I don't know by the criteria as far as their scores, but maybe these two 19th century players. I don't. I maybe not comparing again, and unless it's a post 1893, then you're fine. But pitchers in 1884 and pitchers in 1877 was a whole different thing than Lefty Grove was dealing with. But let's do Sandy Koufax, and let's just see if we can do a comparison here and see how the comparisons work. Bring it up again. So not knocking Sandy Koufax. Good God, wouldn't you? Wouldn't you like to have him? Okay, so here we go. So again, bearing in mind, it's amazing Grove had longevity and greatness. You're speaking of absolutely, absolutely, and let's also give Sandy Koufax a lot more credit too. It wasn't that Koufax had real power teams behind him either. I mean, Lefty Grove had the advantage of 1929, 30, and 31. That at least, I mean, later he would have to pitch against Jimmy Fox. But let's face it, if you're Lefty Grove and you've got Al Simmons and Jimmy Fox on your team, that's going to be helpful. There were more power and just run producing ability in the 1929, 30, and 31 Philadelphia Athletics than you had in the Dodgers in the 60s. Sandy Koufax won that damn World Series. But if we look at wins above replacement, it's not even a contest. 106.8 versus 48.9. But again, that's spread out over Koufax's career. So if we isolate that dominance, that's where you do see the greatness of Sandy Koufax. I don't doubt it. Wins and losses, I mean, again, a lot of that's the pitcher, but a lot of that's the defense you have behind you and the run producing ability of your team. And I mean, Koufax, I mean, you look, I mean, 165 and 87 in a 6-year period. That's nuts. Great pitcher. Lefty Grove, of course, longer career. He's going to have more wins and more losses. Although, interestingly enough, 87, 141. So, 87 losses for Koufax versus 141 for Grove. So, it's not like Grove lost exactly twice as many, or even won twice as many for that matter. Lefty Grove also used in relief, so would come in save situations. A lot of times the day after he pitched a full game, 54 saves, not bad compared to 9. Now ERA, this is where it goes to Sandy Koufax, 2.76 lifetime versus 3.06. ERA plus, this again goes to Lefty Grove, 148 versus 131. Sandy Koufax now was the better strikeout pitcher, not by much, about 100 more strikeouts. But again, in that compressed period. So he takes Grove in that one. Let me see. So if you judge by championships, I don't know whether that's a good indicator or not. Again, Lefty Grove, they had 2 world championships in 1931. Athletics won the American League pennant, did not win the World Series. All-Star, you really can't compare because the All-Star game starts in 1933. But even so, Lefty Grove makes the All-Star team 6 times. Koufax makes it 7 times, each one-time MVP. Cy Young Award did not exist when Grove was pitching. Koufax won it 3 times. The ERA title, 9 for Grove, 5 for Koufax. World Series MVP. So Grove never got that, curiously enough. And both pitchers great in a triple crown, 3 for Koufax, 2 for Grove. And when you look at that 5-year dominance of Sandy Koufax, does he deserve that moniker, the left arm of God? He absolutely does. Bart says even Randy Johnson was similar to Koufax and had longevity to boot. So, yeah, I mean there's that. So, but what constitutes greatness? All right, and again, have we solved who's greater, Lefty Grove, Sandy Koufax? No, ultimately we haven't, and I get that. But my estimation of looking at these numbers, I do think that overall, when you take a career in its entirety, and again, that dominance of Lefty Grove, I will stick by this always, that Lefty Grove, greatest left-handed pitcher in baseball history. But let's talk for a minute, if we can. So, what constitutes greatness? So, when we that's what the writing is in. Is greatness context, or how can we truly say, you know? So, in other words, so Chris saying and making a good argument that an interesting argument saying that Grove didn't get to pitch against the greatest athletes of the planet. So my rejoinder to that would be, by what criteria? At that time, when Grove was pitching in the 20s and 30s and finishing his career in 1941, was he pitching against the greatest baseball players on the planet? Yes, he was. 16 teams, and if you didn't make it to the majors, and before the affiliated minor leagues were created, you were playing minor league ball, but you were playing in some bad ballparks. I mean, we're looking at a picture of a major league ballpark here, and all you have to do is ask Tony Kubek about how hard this infield was in Forbes Field. Remember, ball hits him on the throat, and that gets the Pirates to the bottom of the 9th inning, and Mazeroski going open the window at Minnie over the left field wall here, right? So you can just look at this photo of Forbes Field and look at Forbes Field, right? You can see just the outfield dirt out there. And I realize this is during a game, but go to a major league park now, right? You didn't have the groundskeepers coming out and doing this. So these ballparks, so imagine this is a major league ballpark. Imagine what the minor league parks were. Imagine that. Okay. Greg says also up until about the mid 60s, there was only one Cy Young Award and not one for each league. Yep. Good point. So you had 16 teams. The ballparks were not in great shape. Let's be honest, they weren't. I don't care. We can bring up. We could find a photo, and I'm guessing this is probably the late 50s, early to mid 60s here. Just because the light standards are already up here and everything like that in this big old ballpark. No padding behind that fence, behind this ivy either. That's a brick wall out there. So it is safe to say that yes, Lefty Grove was hitting against the best athletes on the planet, best baseball players. We weren't getting a lot of Japanese players then. We weren't, but at that time, in that context, he was. Michael Peterson said, "Hello, I believe that greatness can be determined based on time, on time that they were in the league and what was going on around it. Koufax was very dominant for those 5 or 6 years. Indeed, he was. So I'm not questioning his dominance, and I'm not disputing Sandy Koufax's dominance at all. It's rather the assertion that he's the greatest left-handed pitcher in baseball history, and I don't agree with that. I agree that he is one of them. What hurt Sandy Koufax? So to counter again with Chris saying when he was saying what's not Grove's fault that he wasn't hitting against the greatest hitters in baseball, which I think we can dispute, but it's also not Sandy Koufax's fault that he was having arm issues I mean, of course, we knew, of course, later he had to retire because of an arthritic elbow. So, I mean, arm issues plagued Koufax, but when they got that under control, the things that were vexing him early in his career, remember, he started as a rookie with the Brooklyn Dodgers. Yeah, nobody could touch him. And I think that's something that definitely um, places him as one of the greatest left-handers of all time. But so greatness, there is that within. So I think, Michael, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that your argument is coming from a perspective of context. So I'm going to put a Marxian spin on this. So Karl Marx said that all works of human endeavor um, are a product of the milieu of the time in which they existed and the time in which they had their genesis. Right? That's what Karl Marx would argue, and so it doesn't make you a communist. Karl Marx was a very, very smart man, and in fact, he himself wasn't a communist. But anyhow, I don't want to get political about this. I'm just trying to put this into a philosophical context. So it begs the question, though, that while context, I think, is something that I mean, the assertion you're making, Michael, I think is a very good one, and I think one that's very intuitive. Grove was great in his time. The question would be, how would Grove during Koufax's time, and vice versa? So, and Jamie coming aboard, STG Jamie, welcome in. He says, great players would be great no matter who, against, or when they played. I look at Shohei Ohtani. He came from Japan. Most will say a league below and still dominant. Yeah, look at his postseason performance. We may never see the like again. What we saw in 2025, we may never ever see the like again. Um, and so Jamie is more coming where I'm coming from, that talent is talent, greatness is greatness. Again, going back to the Mozart argument. Um, Mozart isn't any less diminished because, I mean, people say, yeah, but he wasn't doing music in the time of, and I know some people are going to laugh, but hear me out. So, but he wasn't playing like in 1970s sort of popular music when we still have these great bands that are people are listening to today. So when you had Pink Floyd and you had Led Zeppelin, different genre of music, but still they endure despite all the advances in technology, despite better understanding of acoustics even than they had in the 1970s. Just last night I watched and it's on YouTube. You guys got to check it out if you're Pink Floyd fans at all. Is the Pink Floyd live concert at Earl's Court in 1994. Mind bending, amazing. And this was before all the auto tune and all the crap that's infesting music right now. I contend that greatness is greatness. Um, and Lefty Grove wasn't pitching. There's a YouTuber on here, and I will not mention his name, but he discounts older baseball because while these guys were really in the off season, they were plumbers, they were roofers, they were ditch diggers. Yeah, because right, it wasn't until like guys like Bob Feller came along who started pushing. Bob Feller made a lot of money in baseball, but he saw a lot of baseball players having to struggle, and so baseball players, many of them, even great baseball players, Joe DiMaggio had off season jobs, even right. So they couldn't just go golfing and hunting and fishing all winter. A lot of these guys had jobs. But the fact that they made it to the majors and of course, a very tiny fraction in any era of baseball to be called the greatest, um, that means something. The greatest in their time still means talent against other people, right, that had the talent to make it to the major leagues. I really, really believe that. So, Michael, do we have the only way we have to compare is we look at the numbers and we hope that the baseball simulations that we do that allow us to normalize to different eras can give us give us, if not conclusive answers, at least meaningful fodder for more discussion. But again, to really, really do that, let's say we take a game like Action PC Baseball, and we normalize. We would take Lefty Grove, normalize him to 1965, let's say. All right. And then let him pitch. How's he going to do? Take a Lefty Grove or take Sandy Koufax, normalize him to 1930. How's he going to do? And then to really, really get a good idea, you've got to run those simulations about 1,000 times at least. One season playthrough is not going to tell you anything. You're going to need that to account for all kinds of variance and things like that. So, well, no, so I would switch those around, Bart. It would be the Beatles would be Lefty Grove, and Sandy Koufax would be the Rolling Stones. Greg Gorecki says Ichiro may be the best hitter he's seen since he began watching baseball, and the critics panned him as he was coming to Major League Baseball, saying he only played in Japan. Yeah, and Ichiro, right, was, deservedly, here he is in the Hall of Fame, as he should be, as Otani will be. Grove was, yep. Barbara says, and that's how it should be today. I feel they get paid way too much. Let them earn their money and give us their greatness, not have it easy and make $1 million no matter how you play ball. And you make a point there too. Barry Bonds was asked one time, and look, as a Pittsburgh Pirate fan, I had the opportunity to see Bonds before he, roided up, and we could see in Pittsburgh that this was a great player. He was going to be a great player. He had speed, he had power, and he looked like one of us. I mean, Barry, down there in the field looked like, hey, 175, 180 pounds, whatever. But he was asked about the exorbitant player salaries, and he said, well, and I don't get, this was like, this argument, his retort to this was idiotic. He said, well, unlike other professions, we can't play till we're 60, we can't work till we're 65, so we've got to make the money. Barry, no, most people in the world, not just the United States, are ever going to make what you made in your baseball career, right, in the entirety of their work lives. Many of us are going to, we're lucky if we're going to retire with whatever the hell there's going to be if Social Security remains solvent. Make the money, Barry, but don't compare yourself and your however many tens of thousands of dollars per at bat you made or whatever it was to somebody who's out there and who doesn't have an off season. So and again, I'm not saying that they shouldn't be paid. I do see where you're coming from, Barbara. But then if I would be hypocritical, then I would say, okay, then Paul McCartney, who's worth something like 1.2 or 1.3 billion dollars. Well, Paul, all you did was make music, but the dude's still out there doing it at 83. And I realized that, maybe I would disagree. Entertainment is very grueling too. You're not getting people, hitting you full speed like Pete Rose did to Ray Fosse in the All-Star game. But still, I thought that was a very bizarre thing of Barry Bonds to say. Aaron Reese says, it bothers me how much of the game is so money driven these days. It's like they've lost a lot of love for the game. Well, I mean, baseball wants to talk about its hard stance against gambling and things like that, but yet you still have the FanDuel sports books hooked, the little kiosks and everything, and FanDuel bookie joints. They are bookie joints. Every major league ballpark. It's double standards, Aaron. Michael Peterson says, depends on the person's taste. Compare Ichiro and Rickey Henderson, both great leadoff hitters. They have different styles and how they became that way. And yet still great. I think that, well, he only played, that is like saying, well, Lefty Grove only pitched against. So the context again becomes this: because we've seen a player, we can make make certainly better assessments. But even at the end of the day of that, for those of you who saw Willie Mays in his prime, or you saw Mickey Mantle in his prime, or Duke Snider, since we talked about that New York being the capital of baseball, and when those three great center fielders were playing in the same city. Although Barbara would argue that Brooklyn Dodgers were not a New York team, and I love it. Um, so if you talk to, like, I know I've talked to older baseball fans, and they'll say, well, Bob Gibson was the greatest pitcher of all time. And it will usually follow with, I saw Bob Gibson pitch, blah, blah, blah. I saw Bob Gibson. And so when you bring up to the older baseball fan, well, I never saw Walter Johnson play. I never saw Walter Johnson pitch. So all I have to go by are the stats. All I have are numbers, newspaper accounts. That's all we'll ever have. But to discount these players, and again, Chris, if you're listening to this, I'm not attacking you. I'm rather just giving you my side or my own opinion as you've given me yours. I don't think that again, that in any way diminishes Lefty Grove at all. And there's no fault. Greatest big game pitcher, perhaps. Um, so Greg, you have a talent for bringing up a whole nother conversation right there. Certainly, certainly Koufax has to be in that. Koufax has to be in that conversation. He really, really does. There's going to be other people who argue Greg Maddux. Other people are going to argue, just whatever. But yeah, I mean, Koufax, great pitcher. I don't what. Let's ask the family here. What do you guys think about Sandy Koufax as the greatest big game pitcher, perhaps, when we look at his World Series performance? Okay, so Michael's going to say Bob Gibson. Gibson, incredible. Gibson, great pitcher. In that 1968 year of the pitcher, and that's not to take away from Bob Gibson, but that earned run average, that was Christy Mathewson style numbers there. Addie Joss, pitchers like that. So Gibson, says Greg, is the only one to win 7 consecutive World Series starts. And would anybody deny Gibson's greatness? So my question would be, if you saw baseball in the 1970s, if you're old enough to have seen baseball in the 1970s, all right, what are your opinions on baseball players in the 1950s, let's say, when you weren't alive yet? All right, but maybe you were 10 years old sometime in the 1970s and somebody brings up the name Ralph Kiner. I think also, I think what you have to include in this, Bob Gibson was lethal, yeah, and who'd be, except for Dwayne Martz, who would be brave enough to ask Bob Gibson for the ball in a game, right? But that was so funny, Dwayne. I don't know if you're still here, but that was so funny. But anyhow, um, so when Lefty Grove played, it was just so Lefty Grove starts in 1926. So you got to remember, KDKA does the first baseball broadcast in the 1920s. All right, people are getting radios then through the 30s, but television really doesn't begin. It's in its infancy, but really I think it's like 1939. So we don't have television. People do have radios, but most people are still following like DiMaggio's 56 game hitting streak in 1941. People are following it by radio, also by newspaper, word of mouth. Nowadays, look what we have. We can, somebody 100 years from now, when people are going to be talking about somebody in 2025, 2125, talking about Shohei Ohtani, he's going to be able to just bring up those videos. Boom, there it is. There it is. But even when we look at Gibson's performance back, we're looking at those. The film isn't as good as it is today, even if you remaster it and stuff. But we have ways to say that. Well, I didn't see Gibson pitch. I did see him pitch on YouTube, or I saw him pitch on an MLB Network special or whatever. So Bob would say to McCarver when he came to the mound, "What are you doing here?" Exactly, Greg. Bob Gibson, great damn pitcher. We're not going to. I mean, we're not going to solve. Who? I mean, again, I would say the greatest pitcher of all time is Walter Johnson. Somebody else is going to say, nope, Randy Johnson. Somebody else is going to say Greg Maddux. Somebody else, Tom Seaver. Somebody else, Sandy Koufax. So, but I like these kinds of things because at least we can sort of look at context as one side of the argument. Well, they were great in their time, or they were great because they were just great. They were supremely talented. Maybe that seems like the more like the simpler argument, but for me, that one is more intuitive. That doesn't make the other one incorrect. So there were no other comments really after that, but I thought that was just a fun discussion, and it would be an interesting sort of chin wag. And maybe we don't have to go back to sort of Koufax and Grove, but rather just getting people, maybe asking people to talk about their criteria. Hey, Mick, welcome. He says a few years before he passed, Gibson, and may his memory be eternal, was on a game telecast. He talked about how he taught Carlton the slider, and then admit Carlton ended up throwing the slider better. High praise, indeed, from one grade to another, and nobody is gonna doubt the greatness of Lefty, are they? How about it? Greg said he saw Gibson pitch a number of times against the Expos in Montreal. My friends in Montreal considered a Gibson game an event. Oh yeah, great stuff. Well, Aaron, he's a great ball player. I don't know, he knows his baseball, man, but maybe it's his delivery. I don't know. Bart says you have to include Whitey Ford as one of the top pitchers of all time, especially in the Yankees' dominant 1950s. I certainly think that Whitey Ford was a great pitcher, and I think Dwayne Martz. You're definitely in the Dwayne Martz camp there with Whitey Ford. I think he was great. I think it does help that you have Roger Maris, Yogi Berra, and Mickey Mantle on your team. Um, whereas Walter Johnson had whoever he had. Um, but yeah, and again, I'm not diminishing Whitey Ford. Um, but you can keep leads because Whitey Ford, even with all that run support and all that power, because let's not forget Yogi Berra could crank the ball too. We talk about Maris and that great season he had, and Mickey Mantle over his career, the most powerful switch hitter ever to step on a diamond. Um, but all the run support in the world, if you're a crap pitcher, you're not going to be dominant. So yeah, so definitely you got to give kudos to Whitey Ford. You do. I would not argue that at all. I don't think that Whitey Ford. So I would agree he's one of, but he's not the. But again, who's people is going to argue? Okay, who's the greatest outfielder? We'll just say generally outfielder. Some people are going to say Clemente. Some people are going to say, Wainer. And I realized I've just mentioned two Pirates there. Some people are going to say DiMaggio. Some people are going to say Mays, Mantle, Snyder. Um, and you know what? We're going to be having baseball is still around 100 years from now. We're still going to be having the same discussions. No, Stan Musial was greater because blah blah blah. And I love that about our game because I don't think in other sports, and I'm thinking especially of American football because you guys are in helmets. There's 22 of them on there. How do you talk about it? You can, right? I've heard people talk. Well, this guy's the greatest defensive tackle, and I have to be careful because I don't know a lot about American football. So, um, with that said, can one talk about the greatness of a defensive tackle as meaningfully, and maybe this is my own cognitive bias, as meaningfully as you can talk about a great center fielder because those players are all out there individually. You can see them. Um, if that ball's hit the dead center, whoever that center fielder is, he's got to get to that ball because if it's in dead center, your left fielder, your right fielder, they're going to try to converge, but you're the captain out there in the pasture. You got to make that catch, your range, your arm, you know. So I think baseball gives us that way. I suppose basketball. Um, I've seen some interviews with guys like Magic Johnson who was saying like Larry Bird was like better than all of us. He was in a league of his own, and he took so many people to school. So, but I guess in football, certainly I know people talk about great quarterbacks. You can. Wide receivers, running backs, tailbacks, halfback, whatever they're called in football. But those poor guys in the line, right? I don't know. I don't know how you do that, but maybe those arguments do go on in the other sports. You guys got to tell me. I don't know because I don't follow them. So he was indeed the chairman of the board, was Whitey Ford. Yep. So Greg Gorecki says he has settled it. It is Roberto Clemente. Mick says, someone asked me years ago during gameplay if for my all-time National League outfield I wanted Mays, Aaron or Musial. I answered yes. Yeah, you're not going to go wrong there. So who would be the American League counterpart? What would be the all-time great American League outfield? Would it be would it be uh, would it be Mantle, DiMaggio? Who would be your third? And just anybody. Dwayne, you're still here, I think. Um, and if you are, yeah, you are. You're still here. Dwayne, who's your American League all-time American League outfield? So Mays, Aaron, or Musial answered yes. John says Griffey Jr. Okay, um, so DiMaggio, Mantle, Griffey Jr. Would that be the American League? Good stuff, guys. Thank you all for just indulging me in all this madness today. Cobb Ruth Speaker, says Mick. Just Speaker, great center fielder. Cobb, of course. Come on. Well, we know all three of these guys. They get enough love, Cobb, Ruth, and Speaker. There you go. And you know what? Somebody else could come up with three other names. I'm not going to. I think they're all great outfields. And you're not going to go wrong. I mean, Stan Musial was nuts. Hank Aaron, Mays, yeah. So Cobb, Ruth, Speaker, Mantle, DiMaggio, Griffey Jr. Another one of the reasons I love this game so much. Anyhow, guys, that is pretty much it. I just wanted to get to the comments. And Chris, I hope that you'll answer in the comments or commit some time. Again, this is an argument in the academic sense of the term. And I'd love to carry on the conversation with you. I think it'd be great. Even if you feel like coming on the mic, it'd be great to talk to you about it, or just take your hour and go for it. Aaron Reed says Mickey Mantle, Dale Murphy, and Adam Dunn. So, in the end, is it all subjective? I mean, I don't think anybody's going to argue Mantle. I like Dale Murphy. Adam Dunn, I'm not sure. Is he? That's going to be your American League or your outfield. Interesting. John says this is Aaron, Clemente died at age 38, so perhaps he would have played 2 to 3 more years. Sadly, we'll never know. And exactly 3,000 hits. Just great. Just great stuff. So, just love it. And I just love how engaged everybody is here in this community and how knowledgeable everybody is. Thank you so very much. You make this a special place to be, everybody. You really, really do. All right. With that said, I think we're going to start wrapping it up. Thank you for listening to me rabbit on here for an hour and a half. And thank you for all the comments. When you do leave comments, I do read them. And I try to react to them as much as I can. And some of them, again, that require more discussion, or let's throw it out here to the family. Let's see what everybody thinks. Yes, Clemente indeed had a hell of a career. And Roberto Clemente and Steve Blass really won that 1971 World Series. Not to sell short the other Pirates, but Clemente and Blass, that was just insanity there. Aaron Judge will definitely be included someday, Bart. Yeah, he will. Yes, he will. We do, as much as my focus on this has been looking back on baseball, it's because I want those old players to be remembered. You're very, very welcome. But we've got great players today, too. Everybody take care. Thank you for coming in, and it was a lot of fun. And until the next time, we'll see you around the batting cage, everybody. Have a great afternoon. Go roll up a game or something.